Okay.
All right. So does anybody here have any particular questions they'd like to raise or talk about process, technical stuff?
I think for me, in terms of technical stuff, like, all the recording you send, sometimes I can open some of the ones and some of the ones I cannot open. So I'm not sure whether it's my system.
Well, we had some trouble in the past, but we haven't had any trouble the last several times that I know of.
Okay, I got to recheck it out because I can't always open it. Might just be my system.
Who's your server, Lena?
Sky, I'm with Sky Network.
Oh, you're with Sky.
Yeah.
Because I'm with Virgin, and it can be a bit of a pain at
Okay.
times. Yeah.
No, because the first few that Richard sent when you started recording, I could open it. There was no problem. And then somewhere between, somehow it just didn't open.
Mm.
And it takes me to all sorts of, which one do you want to use, the
Well, look,
player or something else?
Is that what we're trying to record here? Is that sort of stuff?
Oh, no, sorry, because you were asking about anything technical. So I was just mentioning.
About technical in Shen.
Oh, technical, sorry. I was thinking technical IT, yes.
Well, I have I have one
I
thing.
think you have some request email, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. What do you do when your client has had some deep release and then suffers from suicidal thoughts? I had this last week. I advised the client to contact a GP and told him we wouldn't do another session and wait to see what his body does over the next few days. I'm due to see him again this week. He explained that there were only fleeting thoughts and that he didn't intend acting on it. And then I wonder, should I just stop altogether or keep going? Well, have any of you had people expressing suicidal thoughts or intentions or anything?
Richard, I think I mentioned it to you that Adriana has had a client who, in actual fact, had suicidal thoughts. In fact, it was in her history, I hadn't noticed that she had ticked suicidal attempts. I hadn't noticed that. So I told her to go ahead with the client, work with the client, not having noticed that. And it was only when it came up to the third session that the client actually said that she had been self-harming and had been hitting herself and so on. And mainly because her husband was frustrating her and so on. So by that time, it was too late for me to do anything about it rather than let her carry on. And I mentioned it to you, Richard, and you had said at the time that you didn't think, center history, you didn't do anything to worry about for the moment anyhow. So she's continued working with the client, and mainly a lot of the work on the solar plexus and on the calf, and not many issues have come up other than at the sixth session 6, the client then said that she felt embarrassed about having happened, and so that was why she hadn't mentioned it. She hadn't written anything in the history form about it. So but she has this client she's on session, she's done 11 sessions actually, and there's a big change. I can see a big change in how things are going for her.
Okay, well, I'm not quite clear about all of that, but the thing is that there are differences between thinking about suicide and making suicidal attempts and failing. Now, I think a great many people may have fleeting thoughts of, well, if this life gets too bad or my pain's too bad, I can always, bail out. And I think that happens. I've wondered, I'm not anywhere in that kind of state, but I've wondered, well, what if I get so bad that I can't like take care of myself and at all, and I'm in a lot of pain, and I can see where I might want to do something like that. But of course, by the time I got all that incapacitated, I probably wouldn't have a way to do it. But but so the difference is, have they actually tried? Now, and also, what is their surrounding situation? I knew of a case where this fellow was he was not able to take care of himself. He had all sorts of physical and emotional problems, and he was living with his sister and in a big house. Well, his sister wouldn't have anything to do with him. I'm not even sure if she ever fixed a meal for him. She just would leave the house and leave him alone. And at one point, she heard about this place in New York where they were supposed to take in people like that and take care of them. So she goes down, puts him on an airplane, and sends him all the way 3,000 miles away to a place he's never been to before, and without anybody with him. And I mean, just threw him out in the world, more or less. And the people kept him for a while, and then they either let him go or he decided he was going to fly home, and he flew home. It was clear to me that the only reason she got money from the government for her housing on the grounds that it was housing for this mentally disturbed person. And I think that's the only reason that she even kept him around, was that she got her rent paid. It was a bad situation. But his and he made many suicidal attempts, but he couldn't finish it. Until finally one day, she left him alone in the house, and he went out in the garage, opened the garage door, climbed up on a ladder, put a noose around his neck, and jumped off the ladder and killed himself. And he finally had gotten to where he had enough strength to do it. So the thing is that if you're going to work with someone like that, you really the problem with working in conjunction with a psychiatrist, this fellow was under the care of a psychiatrist, is that the psychiatrist isn't going to want to authorize your work. Because if they say it's okay for you to do it, then they've taken responsibility. And if anything happens when you work with him, he's the one that goes before the medical review board and maybe loses his license. But in this case, I don't think it's a problem, because I'll read this again.
I think it's the word what she used, isn't it? Fleeting thoughts. It's a fleeting thought. It's not like.
That's right. He said he explained these were only fleeting thoughts, and he didn't intend on acting on it. And that sounds pretty responsible.
Yeah.
And she doesn't talk about like the fellow I mentioned before was having all of these strange beings come into his mind and claimed they were in the room with us, and intruded in his Shen sessions and everything else. And none of that was happening. And this isn't the same thing, but you mentioned Corona about harming himself or harming the person. Harming
himself.
harming oneself is very different, a very different scene than attempting suicide, because it's like punishing yourself or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's contradictory to killing yourself so you don't have to feel all that. Very different. Anyway, many years ago, I had the opportunity to do Shen in a hospital down in Fort Worth that had they had a big mental health ward. It was run by the Sisters of Mercy or somebody, and they had allowed me to come in. I met the psychiatrist or the psychologist that was in charge of it, along with a medical practitioner, and got invited to come and do some training. And I did some training, and we had some really, really good results, because when people are in a place like that, they aren't just faint symptoms, they're big time. Well, after working with several people, there was a psychiatric section that they heard about what we were doing. This one psychiatrist ended up sending us 4 people to see what we could do. Well, the first one he sent, the first thing she did when she got into the hospital overnight was to turn on this really hot water, which they had really hot water, and scalded her, stuck her ankle, foot under and scalded her ankle, because these voices told her to do it. Well, I think she had 4 sessions by the practitioner that I'd trained, who was one of the assistants there in the unit, and was very sharp. And then I came in, and I can't remember if I worked with her or if I just interviewed her. But obviously she was hearing voices, and not just hearing voices, but doing what they told her to do. And I said, tell me about the voices. And she says, oh, I just don't pay any attention to them anymore. Well, the psychiatrist figured she was cured. and none of us knew if she heard voices or not. It didn't interfere with her life. She lived her life in a normal fashion, took care of herself. And so, and so she was all right. So that's a big difference.
So were you saying, Richard, that after the second session she had, she stopped hearing the voices?
Well, you broke up there, but I'll say it again. I think she had 4 sessions, and a lot of things happened emotionally. The things I don't recall all the things that took place, but emotions came up like we normally would have with a person without this hallucinatory audio hallucinations. And so I asked her, do you still hear the voices? And she said, yes, but I don't, and she just shook her head, but I don't pay any attention to them. Well, as far as I was concerned, and as far as her psychiatrist was concerned, she was functioning. She was able to take care of herself. And if she had weird dreams, well, I've had some weird dreams and they haven't caused me to do anything. And usually we're associated with being really ill or something.
Richard, could I ask a question?
Of course.
What did you work on, or whoever worked on her? What did they work on? You did more than relaxation. You
Oh,
worked
yeah,
on-
well, okay, let me not answer your question by saying we did not do anything specific
Okay,
for that condition.
okay,
There is no protocol for working with voices. But there is a protocol for strengthening a person's ability to stand on their own 2 feet.
Yeah.
Working with the cough.
Kath, yeah.
Yeah. So the difference between her, that woman, and the one who committed suicide because he got the strength enough to do it.
Mm.
But there was someone who had been trying to commit suicide and couldn't make, and would fumble it or couldn't quite make it, and was upset with himself because he wasn't able to commit suicide. Was a whole different ball of wax.
And the same with this client that Adriana was working with.
Yeah. This this is a situation, and one which we always need to be careful about, is that this is not so, this is equally for the protection of the client and for your protection as a practitioner. That you don't want to go off and
So would you say, Richard, that, that's something I've always, I suppose in my own practice, have that in mind, that if you have a client, either they've had suicidal attempts in the past, or they are currently suicidal, you always kind of need to almost assess it, isn't it? I mean, is it just a kind of fleeting, or is it suicidal feeling that is quite strong, that they have started to make plans in their head, like how they are going to do it? And if it's something active like that, for me, I have not taken the client on for that kind of history,
Yeah,
because
well-
if they're under the hospital or whatever, but rightly or wrongly, I don't know. But if it's quite strong suicidal thought with a plan, in their head, they have made a plan,
well, that's the difference.
I
yes.
wouldn't take the client on.
That's the difference, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Also, there's a subtle difference between, mental health issues, or if they have a mental illness, whether it's worth like clarifying that if they suffer from mental illness, is it something that for Shen that we wouldn't take the client on if they have mental illness rather than mental health issues?
Well, that's true. But of course, how you define one or the other is more about how they're affected by it. Like, and are they trying to, like, you
Yeah.
can't Alzheimer's, for example, is a mental condition, but you can't do anything about that, even though there's a whole lot of emotion involved with it. You're not able to deal with the primary cause of the problem because it's a brain malfunction. Anybody else have anything questions they want to talk about?
I was wondering for definite, how long legally are we advised to hang on to clients' records and sessions and things,
Oh, yeah, well,
documentation?
I don't know what it says in the UK or in Ireland. I have no idea. Do you have
We have a rule of 6 years
Or what though, for?
for all sorts of even receipts and personal stuff and about people. If you have notes on people or anything like that, we hold on to them for 6 years, and all receipts that we get as well, all,
Yeah, yeah.
even pay slips, everything,
Mhm.
6 years.
Do you know who puts that rule out? Is it your associate,
Well, I think they get advice on it and that are told to keep it for 6 years. That they'd have legal.
I think is that not mainly to do with finance, Reid?
Well, I don't know. Maybe you're right. I don't know. I thought it was everything.
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
think, well, I'm not sure myself, because like in, like in NHS, obviously, because it's under kind of the government scheme, like because you are working with children in NHS, we have to keep it for like 25 years. It's a long time. But I think for this sort of complementary therapy,
Yeah, because I mean, if somebody was to
it
make a
will be a lot
complaint, for
shorter.
example, and you haven't kept any records or you haven't kept sufficient records, then, where does one stand?
yeah, do you have a, are you able to, to type questions into the search bar on your
Yeah.
computer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could
All
explore
right,
it. Just
type,
thinking
then,
about the right body to write
type
to.
in, just type in the question, how long do mental health practitioners have to keep their records? Something like that.
Mm.
And you should get something. I did it for the States. The new, I have Microsoft's new browser called Bing. Well, it's been around for a long time, but they got a new AI hookup with it. And I did that when you asked me the question the other day, Corona. And I just typed that in there, and it went, and then it spit out. In California, you have to keep them for so many years, and in some states, it's this so many years. And they were talking in terms of, I think 9 or something like that. And so, but that it varies it'll vary by the country for sure. And you may not get a usable answer, but the chances are you will. And if you don't, if you don't get an answer, send me an email with what your question, and I'll see if I can devise a better question and give it back to you. But that's all I could say about that.
Thank you.
Well, if there's nothing else, I'm going to stop the recording because it's just takes forever to finish out. And